SQL Server 2025 and Azure Data Services with Bob Ward.
The Azure and Devops podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using the latest in .NET, Azure, AI, and DevOps. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. The show is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm. Find them at www.clearmeasure.com. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. I'm excited about my returning guest, Bob Ward. He is a principal architect for the Microsoft Azure Data Team, which owns the development for Microsoft SQL Edge to Cloud. Bob has worked for Microsoft for over 31 years on every version of SQL Server that's shipped from OS 2, 1.1 to SQL Server 2025 now, including Azure SQL and all those services. Bob is a well-known speaker for SQL Server, Azure SQL, AI, Microsoft Fabric. He often presents talks on new releases and internals and specialized topics at events that such as SQL Bits, Microsoft Build, Microsoft Ignite, PaaS Summit, Dev Intersection, VS Live, the list goes on. And you can also learn Azure SQL from him on the popular series Azure SQL for Beginners. We'll include a link for that in the show notes. And you can follow him at Bob Ward MS or on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Bob Ward MS. He's also an author of many books. Pro SQL Server on Linux, SQL Server 2019 revealed, Azure SQL revealed, also with a second edition, and SQL Server 2022 revealed. Those are available from A-Press Media, and we'll include a link to his episode 321 where he was on the podcast just recently. But Bob, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Jeffrey. Thanks so much for having me back. It's always fun to come on your show and talk about kind of the latest innovations going on in Azure Data.
Well, that's an understatement, because I think at the time of recording, we're just in a short number of weeks from Microsoft Build. There's a whole lot of data and SQL Server related announcements. Before we get into that, there's new people coming into the industry all the time who maybe haven't seen you speak and haven't stumbled upon your tremendous body of work. To back up a little bit, what are some of the highlights that really have kind of kept you in the data space, and because that's clearly your passion?
I mean, SQL Server is the cornerstone of what I've worked on for my career at Microsoft, and it's pretty exciting that we continue that journey of SQL Server major versions, but also in Azure. I started back several years ago to kind of pivot and make sure I was also working on databases in the cloud, specifically things like Azure SQL Database, managed instance, virtual machines. And then recently, a couple of new technologies that kind of keep my excitement going about data. One is SQL now inside Microsoft Fabric, which is an incredible new data platform. It's got so many exciting possibilities. And then what a surprise, AI. I started that journey in AI almost like a year and a half ago, realizing that I needed to make sure that I, as kind of a trusted source for folks in the community industry to learn about data, understand my perspectives on how to use AI with your data, securely, scalable, safely, but also to create new innovative solutions. I've spent a lot of time on that topic for sure. Those are the kind of things that kind of keep me going and keep me excited about what's going on with data.
Yeah. Well, man, that would be a whole nother topic, just jumping into the AI part.
Sure.
But you're like at the top of the industry when it comes to SQL Server and Azure data related services. Microsoft Build has a whole bunch of announcements. I have a kind of a hard time keeping up with the lay of the land and what's new and what's kind of been maybe rebranded or wrapped. So what is the current set of Azure data services and of course the big SQL Server 2025. So can you give us the high level of what's going on now?
Yeah, you can see here, Jeff, I'm wearing my new vest with the new SQL Server 25 shiny logo. So SQL Server 2025 public preview is about the biggest thing that we did and launch at Build. Build's a great event for developers. We try to make sure that whatever we're talking about that's new and innovative, we use that event to energize developers and make sure they have the latest information about, especially for data, right? So having SQL Server 2025 announced as a public preview for developers is a really, really big deal. I think also in terms of Fabric, SQL database in Fabric got announced last November at Microsoft Ignite. And so we announced the popular Cosmos DB database now in Fabric. So those folks that are looking at Microsoft Fabric as a unified data platform now have actual operational databases to use within that construct. That was a really big deal. And when I think about some other types of AI assistance services, for example, the very popular tool SQL Server Management Studio has a brand new version. SSMS 21 came out with a Copilot inside. It is extremely powerful. Not going to replace any DBA developer, going to really assist them. And then GitHub Copilot technology. We have GitHub Copilot technology both for SQL, for Postgres. So I think kind of those big areas for developers, making sure they understand they have the latest and greatest of AI assistance tools. They have the latest data platforms they need, whether it be SQL Server 2025 or even things in Azure SQL, but also inside Microsoft Fabric. So I was involved in several sessions with those topics, and those are the ones that kind of stand out for me.
Nice. And with SQL 2025, it's been a number of years since the number kind of incremented. It was 2022. What is the big new capability that caused you guys to say, you know what, we need to rev the version number?
I think of three big things. And by the way, real quickly about the version number being a name, it's a great forcing function for Microsoft. When we announce a name with a year in it, we're going to deliver in that year. So we came out last year to announce 2025 in the late 2024. It also gives developers, administrators, architects, confidence that they can start planning for the fact that there will be a new release that they can upgrade to. That's another big reason why we use that year name in it. Yeah. But there are three big areas. One is AI being built in now for developers in a secure, isolated, scalable, yet incredibly flexible fashion. So be able to do things like vector search with your data. Two, I would say the most significant release for developers for SQL Server in a decade, like some really new powerful features. And then three, we have to enhance the engine. We have 40 new engine features across security, performance, and availability. It is a power-packed release, I think, more than people really realize.
Well, okay, 40 new features. Highlight maybe two. What are your favorite? What do you think the most impactful?
Sure. Yeah. Somebody asked me the other day, like, what are your biggest favorite features you're doing? And number one is something called optimized locking, which now developers who don't have to worry about how SQL Server does locking internals, like lock escalations and lock qualification. I mean, developers shouldn't have to worry about those things, right?
Yeah.
Like put a database configuration option on, run your application, and get more concurrent, which is not going to give you more performance. So optimized locking, certainly one of the big ones for me. Another one is really interesting called TempDB resource governance. TempDB is this sometimes thorn in everybody's side to manage a SQL Server. And now you can govern certain groups of users to control how much space they use. So TempDB won't go out of control. Third would just be the pile of improvements for availability groups. Our flagship HADR feature for SQL Server, there are like 10 new enhancements, both for reliable failovers, for tuning of performance, for diagnostics. A lot of great innovations there to kind of prove to our customers that we know that feature is important to you to run your business, and we want to make sure we keep enhancing it.
Okay, nice. You mentioned vector database with people doing RAG. They're thinking, okay, what vector database do I use? But now with SQL, so I'm guessing your answer is no. Don't think about what vector database to use. Just check that box inside SQL Server. Is that the direction?
Pretty much, Jeffrey. I mean, we call it operational RAG with SQL because you, instead of having a separate vector store and then having your data in SQL and trying to copy it around, why not do it all inside SQL Server? So we introduced a new vector data type, like literally just a separate data type for a column where you can store actual embeddings. We've introduced a new way for you to connect externally through REST APIs, could be local in your machine, could be in the cloud, could be in a network somewhere, to popular AI model services. So think of Azure OpenAI compatible Ollama type frameworks. So you can just declare, I want to talk to a model. I want to generate embeddings all through T-SQL. All this is done through T-SQL. Everybody knows that language, right? So we've extended the language to do that. You can generate these embeddings. You can even build a vector index on top of this using the popular disk and technology, and then do vector searching. So what I try to tell everybody, what we're really providing for you is a way to do smarter searching with your data. Think about natural language prompts to power searches on your data, and do it, here's the key, in the security blanket of the SQL Server engine. And the models you choose are ones you choose. We don't force you to use a model. You pick the model, whether it's running in a cloud somewhere or on premises, however you want to do this. It's kind of a package of supporting vector search, which is going to now power AI agents, RAG apps, however you want to go use it.
Okay, so break that down for me. When we're doing that workflow, is the SQL engine the process that's calling out to, let's say, Azure AI for one of those models and then coming back? Or how is that? What's the order?
Yeah,
of
let me give you an
operations?
example. So let's say that you've got text data inside your database, or you're pulling text data in, and you'd like to have the smarter searching capability. What you'll do is you'll use a new T-SQL statement called create external model. You'll say, hey, here's where my model lives. It's like a REST endpoint. Could be, again, on your local network, could be in a cloud. Maybe it's Azure OpenAI. Once you define that, that's like metadata in SQL Server. Now you can say, I would like to generate embeddings or vectors based on my text data. We will communicate this data to the AI model. It'll give us back the vector embeddings. We'll store it in the vector data type. And you don't know what these numbers look like. You don't care.
Right.
You just then go do T-SQL vector searching. So what you might do, for example, Jeff, is you might take a prompt, a natural language phrase or statement. Use T-SQL to generate embedding for that. You've got a number now, a series of numbers. Vector search can take those numbers and compare in your database what are the most similar results for that. I did an example at Microsoft Build where I used the popular VentureWorks database, which has a lot of like biking, equipment and so forth for customers. And my prompt was, show me stuff for extreme sports. Well, the words stuff and extreme are not in the text anywhere. But natural language models, embedding models, understand what that phrase means to find things like outdoor biking, trail biking, accessories for those kind of type outdoor activities. What's really amazing is I showed an example where I took that natural language phrase, I come back with the results that match that, even though stuff and extreme are not in your text. And then because these models can support multiple languages, I took the same prompt, translated in Chinese, and got back results in Chinese. And I didn't change my code.
Nice.
And then let's say that you want to go to a different model. You can just create a new model definition, regenerate your embeddings, don't change your code, and you're ready to go. So it's a really big deal for developers to build these type of applications.
So are people asking you, does this replace full text search? Because the types of testing, the SoundX features, like how to do these fuzzy-ish type non-exact searches, how do you think of that? Isn't it, how much of a Venn diagram replacement is it for full text search?
It can be a full replacement for sure, but I actually think it more of as a hybrid approach.
Okay.
So let's say that you like some of the keyword searching of full text that is more precise, right?
Yeah.
So consider a scenario where you could use keyword searching and vector searching together, or even other where clauses. We have native JSON support now in SQL Server. So you could actually maybe have JSON documents as part of your whole search. I'm going to go search for JSON with a where clause and do a keyword search with full text and do the vector search together. It could replace your whole full text search system, or it could be an actual complement to that. And I've seen developers look at both scenarios.
Okay. You've done so much work in under the banner of edge to clouds. You got the flagship, the new version of SQL Server, all the new features in Azure SQL. But backing off from that, how much of this comes down into the development environment and test, and even down to SQL local DB? How does that whole chain impact it?
We have this motto, ground to cloud, and now Fabric, because SQL's inside Fabric. And so all of these AI features are available everywhere SQL exists. I don't care if you run SQL in a container, run an Azure database, run it in SQL in Fabric, run it on Linux, containers, Kubernetes, doesn't matter. Wherever SQL Server exists, these AI features exist. So you're a developer, you want to use Developer Edition to start testing and looking at this and see how it works, you can go do that. Now, right now in the Azure space and SQL database and Fabric space, there is a little bit of a subset of what I just described to power what I talked about, but those services will come up equally to where SQL Server exists. But imagine a world where the thing I just described about AdventureWorks doesn't matter where you build SQL, and here's why. It's the same SQL engine, the same T-SQL language that is powered across of those. Yeah. Now in the cloud, we will probably limit you more to like Azure OpenAI will be your model type environment. But consider this, one of the big announcements that has been made by Microsoft, both at Ignite and at Build, is Azure AI Foundry. So people should start thinking in terms of Azure. Don't think of Azure OpenAI as your only choice. Azure AI Foundry now is really incredible. It's a set of model services, not just for Azure OpenAI, but for other model services like Hugging Face or an NVIDIA NIM. So think of a complete now AI model hosting system. And since those all support REST endpoints that are OpenAI compatible, we can use any of those. So if you're going to run Azure SQL Database, for example, you now have an incredible set of model catalogs available to you to go access all of that. So it's a complete SQL package. Anywhere we're running SQL, ground to Fabric, AI is going to be built in for you.
So I'm getting a little bit excited here because you said everywhere, and I'm thinking the edge or the small. Does that literally mean like SQL Express, SQL Local DB, anywhere the SQL engine is?
Yeah, so I don't know necessarily about local DB. I don't know whether that particular local DB you install, like gets installed with Windows, would have all of these services. And for Express, we generally wait till we have our general availability of the product to announce like additions and features. So that's a little bit remain to be seen. But here's an exciting one for you. Customers and developers that use standard edition in production often have this problem where they have to chew up a SQL license to test their app to behave like standard, because standard has limits, right?
Yeah.
We introduced at Microsoft Build something called Standard Developer Edition. So now you as a developer can for free develop and test a version of Developer Edition that behaves like Standard Edition, which is beautiful because now you know when you test and build your app, it's going to behave when you use standard in production exactly as you did the development. Mm-hmm. So, that's a really, really big deal. But as far as the exact features that go in specific editions, we will announce all that when SQL 25 becomes generally available.
Nice. And you mentioned container on Linux. With the modern version of SQL Server, what is the kind of the smallest size that you can spin up a SQL container these days?
Man, I'll have to go look at the smallest limits you can do, but it is pretty small. I mean, I particular can spin up which by default is Developer Edition. I can spin up a container on my laptop using Docker, for example.
Yeah.
At the smallest limits of SQL memory and disk footprint. I have to go back and look and remember what even those look like. But yeah, you can create a very, very small containerized package if you want as a developer. We're not talking about you need to have huge amounts of gigs of memory or huge amounts of storage. It can be very, very small to be able to go develop.
That's awesome because there's so many developers you have been using SQL Express or SQL Local DB just to have the small version of the database, which in production the database is massive, but just to get the schema and all the related things. But
the container can be SQL Express. So like we support the SQL Express edition in a container. So if you want it to be just expressed in a container, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, this is awesome. And so where does now SQL Server stop and Databricks and all these other things in Azure start, and how should listeners kind of keep that straight in their mind with, okay, what needs to go in the SQL engine now and what needs to go in a not SQL Server Azure data service?
Well, I'm pretty biased, as you know. I think everything can go in SQL Server. We still have a lot of customers running analytic type workloads, even in SQL Server, because of features like column store.
Yeah.
For me at Microsoft, I look a little bit more at Microsoft Fabric as that alternate approach to run certain workloads if it's not going to be in SQL Server. And one of the really cool things that I personally believe is a great feature of Microsoft Fabric is something called OneLake. Maybe you've looked at it or people on your show have heard about it. It's that common storage facility inside Fabric that's all based on Delta Parquet. And the reason it's beautiful is because you can take all these different types of data sources all over the world, doesn't matter what it exists, put it in OneLake. And if you actually convert it to Delta Parquet, you now have literally a database sitting there for you to do any kind of analytics, semantic models, Power BI, data science, anything you need. It's really powerful. So like one of the things we announced at Build for SQL Server customers is SQL Server mirroring. Now, one of the things I love about mirroring in Fabric is mirroring can exist wherever you want it to be. I can mirror Databricks, Snowflake, Oracle, now SQL. I've Azure SQL already, but SQL Server on-prem now can be mirrored into Fabric. And one of the things I've shown our customers about how to do that is to take different data sources, including SQL Server, mirror these in. So that's like a near real-time analytic feed going in to this OneLake, and it looks like one database. Imagine you having this one data lake that you query on or run whatever you want on top of it, fed from all these sources, but you don't really care anymore where those sources came from. So for me, I think Databricks is an amazing platform, but I really kind of have customers take a little bit more look at OneLake inside Fabric as that great functionality. SQL Database in Fabric, which we announced last November, automatically is mirrored into OneLake. So I try to think about those scenarios where I don't want to touch the operational database, read replica type scenarios, analytic scenarios, right? And I start looking at OneLake as being that functionality for me.
Okay. And the Parquet format, does Databricks use that also, or is that
Yeah, Databricks. Yeah, definitely Databricks is one that kind of came up with Delta. Delta is kind of a version of Parquet that supports transactional type operations. So Databricks they actually kind of came up with that format, and then we support that format in OneLake.
So from a formatting perspective, they're going to have. Should they think about SQL Server as the OLTP data, and then the Parquet format and those related services for all the like historical that they would need to run analytics on?
I don't think necessarily historical is the right word. I think just more like even near real-time analytics. So like if I think about the scenario about SQL and Fabric, for example, we're kind of pitching that to our customers as your operational database. If you want to say OLTP, that's fine, but some people don't have like a true hardcore OLTP system, but they do have a lot of read writes.
Yeah.
Okay. So SQL Database and Fabric offers that. It's a SQL Server engine. You just go after it, right? Because we're mirroring that into OneLake, a read copy of this, and keeping it up to date, now I can do the near real-time analytics in the lakehouse now, in my OneLake. And so that's how I like to think about it. You could technically still, run column store index queries on SQL Database and Fabric or in SQL Server. But I think the reason why I love the lakehouse approach is because it's offloaded and doesn't affect my operational database. And I can easily, again, integrate with all these other sources so easily. And it's kept up to date. So it's not just historical. It's actually near real time. We're talking like not hours, but like minutes, seconds of having updated of data. So imagine this scenario. You've got a bunch of Power BI users out there, right? Mm-hmm. You need to provide access to reports on all these different data sources. Now use the Fabric to either mirror it in, use Fabric, things like SQL Database and Fabric, get it into a lakehouse. Now the Power BI users are hitting that lakehouse. So they have something called Direct Lake now, where it's much faster to go hit this lakehouse. So I think of that as being like a really sweet spot for how to take data, pull it together, and run things like analytics. And one of the cool things the Power BI guys announced, this is kind of crazy stuff. At Microsoft Build, here's a new term for you, Jeff. Translytical. Translytical. It's a new term. Power BI users can build reports in Fabric and update data from the report. So you're looking at a report, and you can say, look, I wish these values were changed. With the right permissions, they could actually go set feedback and make a change to the actual source database. Kind of a new way of doing, again, translytical, transactional, and analytical together.
You mentioned AI and the models and all that, but with a lot of the .NET team talking about AI-driven development, and with Copilot being in the data products, strategically, how are you thinking about that? What are y'all driving towards? What's already possible, and what are you trying to make possible?
Yeah, so much as possible is kind of surprising to most people. For me, it's all about making developers efficient, more productive, higher quality code. That's what it's all about. Or getting started, like that kind of thing. But even analyzing code. I mean, I've used it myself. Like, give me an example. Let me give you an example for the GitHub Copilot for SQL that just got announced.
Okay.
So you use Visual Studio Code. It's in Visual Studio Code. You have GitHub Copilot enabled, which is a free version now. Yep. You've got what's called the SQL extension enabled. So you connect to a database, a server. Could be Azure, could be SQL Server. Now the GitHub Copilot is aware of your connection. And you could say, really simple example, build me some SQL queries. Build me a query that does the following on my database. And it knows your schema and can generate some T-SQL for you that you start iterating on. And then you might say, okay, this is great. I'd like to go build some .NET code that uses this query to go iterate through some rows and update some data based on this. And it starts spitting out .NET code examples for you then to go take and edit and modify. And then you start integrating that with a complete GitHub repo and have GitHub Copilot start looking at your PRs. So to me, it's not about getting rid of developers. It's about making developers way more efficient. And to me, it's especially about code quality. Like I can take GitHub Code for SQL. I can say, here's some .NET code for SQL. Point out any possible problems. Just say that. And I've done it before where it's pointing out security and like T-SQL injection possible scenarios. It's pointed out performance issues. Or maybe I didn't write the code correctly. I could cause a performance problem, both on the SQL side and on the actual .NET side or on my client side. So to me, it's already possible to do those things. But where I really see it headed down the path, making developers more efficient, writing more quality code, more performant code, which is going to make it a lot easier for administrators to manage these SQL servers and these cloud databases. So now I have less performance problems. I'm faster to development, faster to market, more efficient, higher code quality. I mean, that's what I see in all the examples coming up.
And I'm sure that there are schools out there that do it well, but so many developers are not getting data modeling as a first class part of the computer science education. Then they come in and maybe work in a scenario where there's not a well-seasoned data engineer, but guess what? It's their job to put together a database, and so that they have to do the data modeling. Have you seen Copilot used yet in scenarios where those types of modeling decisions have to be made, and like even just building up a transactional schema or building up an analytical schema?
100%. I mean, I've used it myself. And what I love about it is because these technologies are a little bit similar using models, I can do what you talked about inside Visual Studio Code with our GitHub Copilot or at SSMS. And it's quite good about helping you try to build proper designs. Or you may say to the model, okay, this is great, but is there any performance issues? And the model may say, yeah, this is really normalized. You've probably heard that term before, very normalized database. You might consider denormalizing here to make things more efficient, and then even tell you the trade-offs of doing that. So no question, database design, data modeling, Copilot technology in general, I think are helping the industry, not just developers, even administrators, evaluate a current database design to say where maybe can I be more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Index design, I mean, all those kind of type things are all possible with Copilots. And honestly, I've used them myself personally. It's pretty good.
What about testing? I know that that's not product specific, but it always seems to be a challenge with testing new designs and databases, which when they get to production, they're going to be a whole lot larger than they are, in development scenario. Have there been any advances in the techniques for testing databases, not just performance, but even just integration testing scenarios?
Well, first of all, the Copilot technologies I've used myself to build test harnesses for what you're talking about. Look at my database schema, look at my code, help me build some test harnesses for different scenarios, different inputs, different types of scenarios, different things. But I still think, I look at things like GitHub Actions as being very powerful. SQL has a good integration there. So I think about building those those CI/CD pipelines. And guess what? Copilot now has the ability to help you build the pipelines. Help me build test harnesses and help me make it work in a GitHub CI/CD pipeline so that automated tests can run before the PR is actually accepted or submitted. So that combination is very, very powerful. And these tests don't have to be, like you said, just performance. Like, here's a good example about performance, though, is building data sets. Like, I don't want to use production data, but I need to have some simulation of that on the size of data. Mm-hmm. I've had Copilot generate data sets for me. Hey, Copilot, go build me a table like this with a random set of data of these types of even a terabyte or 100 gigabyte or something. And it'd be able to spit it out, and it's really good at doing that. So I think about building those data sets as well. I mean, the funny story for me, ironically, is doing demonstrations. I use now Copilot to say, hey, I'd like to go build a demonstration for an ordering system with, a shipping company. And it starts spitting out these example schemas and data sets that allow me to edit and make it better. But all sorts of possibilities there for testing for sure.
I'm visualizing it. Is it spitting out insert statements, like files with the insert statements that you execute, or what does that look like? Yeah,
it could be, but it could be just like a loop where it just randomizes the data. So it doesn't have to be like insert. It could be a loop where it just injects things to randomize the values that are there. Or you could even say, you could build a small data set first and say, okay, well, how do I go take this and make it even bigger? I know it could actually generate a BCP file for you if you want to do that and bulk it in. All sorts of possibilities.
Yeah. So many developers for a number of years, they've used Entity Framework in its various forms and Dapper and Hibernate long ago. And that was when you're handcrafting mapping code when you're writing your .NET program that uses a SQL Server database. Do you see that changing?
EF Core is still the primary provider I see developers using. And EF Core's gotten some updates. I think it's a lot better in generating what it does. And I think GitHub Copilot also can be used to help you generate the smart EF Core code you need to do this. One nice addition is that EF Core has been enhanced to support our vector support. So like you want to make sure that if using that vector search capability, do I have to go write all the T-SQL? No, you can just use EF Core support for vector searching and it generated it for you. So I still see EF Core as being a great framework for developers. It's been improved and we still see a lot of developers using it for sure.
Okay. So that's a safe bet on into the future. I think
so, yeah.
Even with the AI changes.
But I've seen developers say I want more control. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to use that framework. I'd like to go a little more just into .NET itself. with the .NET providers, and that's still a great option as well. But EF Core remains very, very good, and I've seen a lot of developers successfully use it.
Yeah, yeah. With the 2025 version, all the new announcements, are there any enhancements to DAC or the automated deployment story?
There's no necessarily enhancements there to make it any different. It just is all supported for SQL 25 with everything we're doing in the release. So there's no really big new thing there that we're supporting. I don't know if you've seen it before, but prior to 25, we've got things like SQL projects, SDK style projects now in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, much more efficient way of doing database projects, which use DAC packs. So that's been there already, and that's all supported with SQL.
Yeah. It is going forward, like internally, is DAC pack universally used for deploying changes to databases, or what's the lay of the land there?
DAC pack is still super popular. We still like that framework of technology to deploy those database changes. And it's now integrated with everything we do behind the scenes. So yeah, DAC pack, we're doing it in SQL Database and Fabric, for example, has that all integrated as well. So yeah, DAC pack is still, I think, a very good technology, and we still stay on top of keeping that up to date.
Got it. What is next? What is next for you? I know you keep on the speaking circuit and you keep busy, but what's next for Bob Ward?
Well, internally at Microsoft, besides what you see me visibly as being an industry presence for Microsoft to talk about ground to cloud to fabric, and that keeps me pretty busy, there's no question. Internally, I do a lot of work within Microsoft to influence the future of what we're doing, whether that be the next version of SQL Server after this, whether it be what we're doing inside Azure SQL for our developers, and also what we do in Fabric. So trying to make sure, well, and one of the things I think I bring to the company, and my colleagues have told me this, is that consistency story. Like, hey, if we're going to go do SQL in Fabric, are we doing things that are new and great for Fabric, but also still keeping in mind the things that people need for that consistent story for SQL Server? So I stay pretty busy internally working within our organization to make sure all those things happen. I will tell you that one of the things I'm passionate about is using AI responsibly and in a way that really helps you. So I do a lot of work sometimes internally in the company to do that, not only just part of my job, but looking at that also for the industry. So I'm going to stay on top of that. It's hard to stay on top of, as you can imagine. So I want to make sure our SQL Server customers understand whatever we're doing, we're going to be there with all the latest innovations for AI, but only in the right way. Like if some innovation comes out for AI that doesn't make sense for us, let's not do that. But keeping ahead and staying up to date for those technologies is really important for me, both internally for how to become more efficient as a developer, as just an employee at Microsoft, or for our customers and how they use our data.
I want to dive into that for a second. When you say responsibly, I can think about obscenities but what do you like? What does that mean in your mind?
Certainly content safety, what you talked about, is important to me. So if we're going to talk about AI, we're always going to talk about how to do that, how to use content safety. But for example, when I talk to customers about AI, I ask them, do you have an AI policy? Do you have like a responsible policy for AI in your company? Microsoft does. We have a very big policy at Microsoft on how we build products that interact with AI. It's a very stringent process that we have to go through internally to release anything with AI. So I always try to encourage customers to go look at that and say, are you deploying your own responsible policies? And again, you just said it. Content safety is a really biggest thing. Fairness, trust, accuracy. And number one for me is trust but verify. Like, are you really using AI in a way that you verify what it's doing and using for you? It doesn't matter what kind of scenario you're talking about. It could be building a chat app. It could be using GitHub Copilot, whatever it may be. It could be using Microsoft Copilot as an employee to search for data or build team meeting recordings or whatever. So I always encourage everybody. I guess I'm just old school, Jeff. I love being more efficient. I want to find things to be more efficient. I'm always looking to how to be more efficient as an employee at Microsoft and as a person. But I want to make sure what I'm doing is responsible and it's used correctly. And I'm not just relying on it. Recently, I did an AMA on Reddit, for example, in SQL Server 2025. I hadn't done an AMA in Reddit in a while. That was kind of fun. But I did use AI to go look at the Reddit, all the posts, and summarize for me what was said, what was the sentiment like, what things should we focus on at Microsoft based on what they said. But I reviewed it. I didn't just take this thing and just ship it off to our team. I mean, I looked through it to see what it said, to see, is this accurate? Is it reasonable? Is it right? And then I edited it. I took it and put it in a doc. I made some edits, some changes. But guess what? I used Copilot and Word to actually help me summarize some of the things I was saying.
Nice.
So again, I'm just trying to find a way to be more efficient with it. Trust but verify. And then content safety is a big thing for me.
And for the listeners, if you don't use Reddit, AMA just stands for Ask Me Anything. So,
sorry. Ask Me Anything. Yeah.
The acronym, please.
I started getting on Reddit for the SQL Server subreddit back last November, and it's been a great experience, honestly. People are very direct out there, but I need that. I need to see the directness of what people are saying. Yeah. And it's really been fun to go see what people have to say because SQL Server is still popular. I did a post on SQL Server 25 public preview on subreddit, and I got like 20,000 views in like a week. So people are very still interested in this product, and they're interested in Azure data in general. But that SQL Server subreddit's been a lot of fun to be a part of.
Yeah. You say SQL Server is still popular. That would I never called into the question but isn't it true that SQL Server's growth rate just continues on up and to the right? It's not like it's just holding steady. It's still growing, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. So now there's no customer that I have today that just uses SQL Server on premises. None.
Yeah. Right.
It's a combination.
Use everything.
So the growth of SQL itself is, you're correct doing that. The growth between whether it's Cloud, Fabric, SQL Server is kind of a little hazy, quite frankly, right? And SQL Server now is hybrid, connecting with Arc to Azure. So it works in so many different ways, but the growth of SQL all up, grounded cloud and Fabric, is definitely still growing. And by us showing the world and industry that AI can now be part securely with your data, that's generated a new interest in SQL, I think. I think people realize, these people are really serious. They're still innovating on this database system. It's been out there forever. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the tagline for SQL 25 is the AI-ready enterprise database. And it's not just a marketing line. It's like, it's AI-ready for you, but it's enterprise because we have this tradition of providing the mission-critical features that enterprise needs. Mm-hmm. So the growth rate is very exciting, AI being a part of that. These developer features, things like JSON being built in, regular expression support, change event streaming type technologies, support event-driven architectures, REST API support inside the engine, a lot of new innovations and there's like 15 new T-SQL function enhancements. So a lot of things for developers built in. And that's also excited developers again. And then Jeff, we even announced a new Python driver. So we care about communities like Python developers, not just .NET C# developers. And so that's excited a new set of developers as well. So as you can tell, I'm a little bullish on our future.
Yeah. Well, I first started using SQL Server in, I think it was 1998. I don't remember what version it was.
7.0.
So that's when I first started using it. And all along the way, there are certainly things that announcements that came out, not just within Microsoft, but around the industry of, it would call into question how, to use SQL Server for a certain use case. And then the dust settles and says, well, I'll just use SQL Server for that. And then it'll be something else. And then, MongoDB and the document databases and that call into question, we need to use this now instead of SQL Server. And then the dust would settle. And then we'd realize, we'll just use SQL Server for that. And even for low volume queuing, yes, we can use Azure Service Bus for super high volume but for low volume queuing scenarios where you just need some type of queue. Well, guess what? A simple table in SQL Server with, the in-service bus library. Guess what? We use SQL Server for that. So, it's been a constant since my experience in 1998, and a year goes before that. But it's just so universally useful and doesn't seem like there's any stopping it.
That's how we think. And when we make decisions about new things to put into the product, we take in a couple account of a few things. Number one, what is the industry doing? What do we need to do to keep up with industry innovations like AI, for example? Because we want people to know that they can, again, like you said, I'm invested in this. Are they going to keep up with that? Number two, we want that engine to be innovated because people just rely on their business. So the engine has to be good, right? You have to make sure that engine is still good. And number three is customer feedback, user feedback. So if you look at what's in SQL Server 2025, there are several things where customers just said, can you just please do this? Yeah. Regular expression support in T-SQL is a great example. For a decade, people have said, I don't want to write all this extra code. I want to go into T-SQL and do pattern matching with regular expression. Well, that's in SQL 25 for developers. So we do the best we can to look at those three areas every time we're building. And in the cloud, we're always looking at that because we're innovating there and enhancing the cloud, not just on a major release cycle, but all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very cool. Well, as we close up here, for listeners who kind of want to go deeper, what's the go-to online resource that you would point them to dive into the things we just talked about?
Well, first of all, it's public preview. We want you to download it and give it a spin and try it. So we have these aka.ms monikers you've probably seen me use a lot. One of them is called ak.ms get get SQL Server 2025. That's the way to start. Like just go there, right? Because if you go there, you will then just download the software. And then one other resource I would say is, this is an interesting one. It's called ak.ms/SQL Server 2025 DECS, DECKS. Why? Because I took my slide for Microsoft Build and I put it on there. And at the back end is a slide that has all the links, like every link you need for documentation, for our blogs, for our videos, for everything we've done. It sits on that site. And as I iterate and do new presentations on SQL Server 2025, I'll always throw my decks up there. I'm an open source presenter. I want everything to be there. So those are the two resources I would point you to, because that second one will just point to a slide that gives you everything you need.
Nice. All right, we'll include both of those in the show notes. And that was, the second one was SQL Server 2025 DECS?
Yeah, that's correct.
Fantastic. Awesome.
And then if you, Jeff, anybody out there listening to this audience, they need to present to their colleagues or their customers about SQL Server 2025, you are free to use that. That's open source, right? So just use that deck to your heart's desire. There are demos built into the deck you can even use. So like I said, I want people to just go spread the news about what's in this release, and anybody's welcome to use it.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, Bob, thanks for coming back on the Azure and DevOps podcast once
pleasure.
again, and sharing with us the landscape of all things data and SQL Server and Azure data. I appreciate it.
Great to be on your show again, Jeff. It's always great, insightful questions from you, and it's really a pleasure to be back on your show again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure and DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at www.clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.